So welcome everybody. I wish I could see you all, but unfortunately, times are calling for us to do things a lot more virtually these days. I love doing these presentations virtually, or sorry, in person, because there's a little bit of interaction and I can see people's reactions a little bit more. And so in order to try to keep it a bit more interactive, we have a couple polls throughout the session, and we're also going to open it up for questions and answers at any point during the presentation. So as I'm talking and something comes to mind, please feel free to put it into the Q&A section, and I'll try to make sure that I'm answering it along the way. And if I miss something, then Bobby Lynn will pipe in and remind me that there's a Q&A question in there too. So welcome everybody to Building a Culture of Innovation. My name's Nilufer Erdebil, and I'm with Spring2 Innovation. Today, we're going to talk a lot about building a culture of innovation, but also talk about what's been going on right now in terms of the transitions that we're all going through, and how we can be even more innovative and creative throughout this. This is actually a really good opportunity to figure out what you want to transition to, and also what you want your culture to be like going forward. And so I see that there's a whole bunch of people on the call. And so in order to get us started, I'm going to ask Bobby Lynn to put up our first poll so that I get to have a better sense of who's in the audience and what type of background you're from. And so I wanted to understand which industry that you guys are coming in from. Okay, which sector do you practice human resources in? Manufacturing, education, healthcare, public sector, consulting, or other? Can you guys take a second to answer the poll, and then we can see where everybody is coming in from?
We've got about 60% response so far, so just waiting another minute here.
Fantastic. And as Sarah mentioned earlier too, is we do a lot of consulting and training for both private sector and public sector. And so we've done a lot more recently in the public sector and private sector before that. And now, as we're doing the transition, a lot more into the private sector too. So give folks, oh, okay, we got results. Okay, so 23% in manufacturing, 8% in education, 8% healthcare, 9% in public sector, 8% in consulting, and 44 other. Okay, so other's a big group, but it's good to understand that there's a large contingent from manufacturing, and then probably evenly based around education, healthcare, public sector, and consulting. Okay, that's fantastic. Thanks, everybody. So that's good to know. And so we'll have both private sector and public sector examples throughout the session. So just to bring you guys forward here, today we're going to talk about building a culture of innovation and taking a look at different perspectives. We're going to chat a little bit about experimentation too. I think that's a really big part of not only innovation, but also creating culture of innovation. We'll spend some time talking about understanding customers and understanding our employees, and then close it off with reframing and a small portion on selling innovation internally in organizations, because I know that's traditionally been a little bit more difficult, especially in larger organizations. And so we'll touch on that. And then if you guys have any questions, we can go further in depth on any of the areas that you guys want to go into. So I'm going to ask you guys, think about the last time you guys saw a hockey game. And so I'm based out of Ottawa, by the way. And so our hockey team is the Ottawa Senators. I don't think they were doing super well last year. I'm not sure. But what I want to ask you guys is, as you guys are watching hockey or playing, when you watch the goalie, does the goalie score? So that's a poll for you. Do goalies score? I'm gonna give you guys about 20 seconds to answer that one. Oh, okay. So do goalies score? Yes, 44%. No, 56%. Um, I'm not as familiar with hockey, so I actually had, I was talking to one of my sons about this, and he said that goalies can score, but they usually don't. And the reason behind that is that their role and their job is to protect the nets. I'm more of a soccer player, and so in soccer, you have a goalie. You also have defense, midfielders, forwards. And so when we're playing, yes, the goalie can score, but it's not really their role. The role of the goalie is to make sure that they're protecting the goal, and they can also help lead what's happening on in the field so that people can see what's going on from a different perspective. And so with all sports, it's the same as with business. You want to make sure that you are able to know what people's roles are and be able to take their perspectives as you guys are making decisions in terms of moving forward. Same for any sport. I also do figure skating. So same with figure skating. You have your coach, you have your choreographer, you have your physiotherapist, your massage therapist, your off-ice trainers, your ballet trainers. And so everybody in that system has a role to play, and you need everyone's perspectives. And so we want to think about the same thing as we're moving forward and thinking about our businesses too. And so as we're looking to become more innovative organizations, and as we're looking to transition right now, I want you guys to think how your organization is going to survive without innovation. And then how can you innovate if everyone thinks the same way too? You really do need the different perspectives. And so people that can see picture or the story from the different angles. And so my undergrad was in engineering, and one of the first courses that we took was in mechanical engineering. And so the object on the left-hand side is what it's going to look like in 3D. But if you're going to map it out and draw it out, then you need to look at it from the side portion, from the front portion, and then from on top of it. And it's the same with what's going on in the world today. Is we need to be able to see it from the different perspectives and empathize, listen, and practice observing as we're trying to understand the world from all the different perspectives. And so right now, there's a lot that's shifting, not just for businesses, but also for ourselves in our private lives too. And so how can we look at what's going on from all of the different perspectives? A lot of organizations have different definitions of what innovation is. But there's a key component of where innovation comes from. And it's usually from an individual or from working in intimate groups. A lot of it has to do with collaboration. And so innovation is about changing conventional thinking. And what conventional thinking has been shifting quite a bit too as our environment has shifted. And this is actually a really great time to be more innovative and creative, because we're all being forced to challenge our thinking and our norms and our values. It's also a really great time to be experimenting too, because everyone is needing to shift and adjust and experiment along the way until we figure out what is actually sticking and for how long. As we're going through our current shift, we're not sure how long this phase is going to last for. And then post-COVID, it's going to be quite different too. And so you want to make sure that you're creating environments where people feel free to be innovative, creative, and do it collaboratively. And so one of the huge components of innovation is the ability to think more diversely. And so how can you encourage diverse thinking to enhance the culture of innovation? And that's to make sure that you're getting the different perspectives that you might not have. And there's several ways of doing that. We're going to go through a couple of them. But before we even think about the culture of innovation, we also want to talk about innovating individually. And so as we're looking at individuals within the organization, individuals come together to create that culture. And we want to have individuals in the organization that have some of the qualities of being able to innovate individually. So perseverance is a huge component of it. Creativity, curiosity, the ability to sell, because innovation, a lot of it is also about being able to sell internally and externally, people that understand the concept of time and the need to be speedy, people that are really good at communicating, people that are good at collaborating, experimentation, and also supporting other people too. Now, today we've only got 2 hours together, so we'll cover off a few of these, but if you guys have more questions, please feel free to ask along the way. And so experimentation has been linked a lot with innovation. The picture that you see here actually in front of you is from a few years ago. I have 2 boys that are 11 and 13. And a few years ago in the summertime, I took the afternoon off to take them to Meech Lake. And so that's a lake in Gatineau, which is probably about a 25-minute drive from our house. And so I took them there thinking that it's a really nice hot summer day that they would go swimming. And so we get there and we find a spot close to this creek. And I get everything set up and I'm sitting down and the kids have discovered this creek and start building dams. And so I see them creating dams and then watching the water stop and then taking apart the dam and then structuring it a different way. And again, blocking the water, whether using rocks, sand, their crocs, and then doing it over and over again. And 20 minutes in, I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, you guys can go swimming, we can go for a hike. And I'm trying to think of other things that they could be doing without considering that what they're actually doing at that moment is they're experimenting. And so we're innately born with a desire to be curious, to experiment, and to learn. But because we have other things on our minds, other tasks that we need to be doing now, that curiosity has diminished a little bit. And so what can we do in our environment to create that space for creativity and experimentation? And I think this is a really good time for that to happen because we don't have as many things on our plate in order to be able to take our mind off of it. There are other things that have come up, like grocery shopping has never been more dangerous than now. And so it's pulling back and looking at what are some different things that you can learn and experiment with right now. And so it actually took me, we were there all for at least 3 hours. It took me 45 minutes to really fully sink in that I was too busy thinking about all the other stuff that I wanted to do after we were done being at the beach, that I wasn't enjoying what was going on and I wasn't appreciating what the kids were doing and what others were doing. And that's being there in the moment. And so other people have been really great at doing experimentation and learning. Steve Jobs from Apple, before starting up Apple, he actually took a whole bunch of different courses, including a course on calligraphy. And from that, he was inspired to create different fonts on the computer. And so it's because of that one calligraphy class that he took that he was doing learning outside of marketing and outside of computers that we now have different fonts on our computers, including within Word and PowerPoint too. And so you never know when the learning and the experimentation are going to come in handy later on. And so how do you create the space and the environment for you and the people within your organization to experiment? And that's by providing time and making it a priority for them. And right now, and we'll get to what your environment's like in a little bit too, but right now there is a lot more leniency towards experimenting and learning, both from your end clients and then also the general public itself too. And so how can we encourage experimentation? Part of that is the culture, building a culture where it's okay to fail. And so if we take a look at experimentation, probably only 10% of experiments generate positive results. And so in a way that sounds really bad, but if you're doing a lot of experimentation, that actually adds up to a whole bunch of successes. And so in organizations where there's an experimental culture, employees aren't daunted by the possibility of failure. In fact, in some, it's actually encouraged and then encouraged to also share the failures that you have. I'm not sure if they have this in Windsor or other cities in Ontario, but in Ottawa, we have an organization that does F-up nights. And so business owners get together and they share some of their failures so that others can learn from them too. And it's just really enveloping this appreciation that from failures we can learn and that it's okay to fail. And so there was actually a really great article in the Harvard Business Review recently about experimentation. And there's an organization called Booking.com out of the Netherlands. And they're the #1 digital platform for bookings globally. And they do thousands and thousands of experiments on a weekly basis. And their motto is that the people who thrive at Booking.com are curious, open-minded, eager to learn, and figure things out, and are okay with being proven wrong. And so it goes back to, it's okay to experiment, it's okay to be curious, be open-minded, but it's also okay to be wrong. And that's what experimentation is about, is discovering things as opposed to trying to prove things right. And so I have a warning at the bottom of the slide too, is that we tend to happily accept good results that confirm our biases, but challenge thoroughly bad results that go against our assumptions. Any questions so far, by the way? I feel like I'm going through this really fast, and so feel free to ask in the Q&A area.
Yeah, no questions yet, but I did remind the attendees that they can. Yep.
Perfect, thank you. So sometimes when we do experimentation, it's actually by accident. And so think about how many times I do this myself is I start going somewhere and then I take a wrong turn. And then I find myself trying to figure out how to get back en route. And by making that mistake, I actually end up discovering a new part of the city, and then find myself a couple months later in that part of town and thinking to myself, oh, wow, it was really great that I got lost a couple weeks ago, because now I know this area even better. And the same thing can happen in your business too, is you might end up doing unintentional experimentation, but it's really important to pay attention to what is that telling you and asking some questions behind that. And so, for example, a few years ago, Amazon had this game called Air Patriots. It's a mobile device game where players defend towers from attack with a squadron of plants. And so they released a new version. And what they found is that once they released that new version, the 7-day user retention dropped by 70%. And their sales actually decreased by 30%. And so after doing some research, they'd found that they'd inadvertently increased the game difficulty by about 10%, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it had a significant impact on how much people were using the game and how much they were able to sell during the game. And so the people that inadvertently created this challenge pulled back and thought, okay, let's make some experiments. And so they put out 4 different prototypes for people to try out. And what they found is that the prototype that was easiest actually had the largest gains in retention and also the largest gains in revenue. And so what they did was that they created a new version that made it easier. And so people spent 20% more time playing, and it increased their revenue 20%. And so this is actually an accidental experiment, but once they discovered the challenge, they pulled back and thought, what can we learn from this? And then how can we continue to further experiment so that we can learn even more? And so as you guys are going through in your organizations and you guys are shifting, if you need to shift, or if you're still staying on course, is think about what can you experiment with? And it doesn't have to be products or services. It could also be internal processes and policies too. And for the folks that are in the public sector, we do a lot of this for regulators too, is what are some of the things that you can experiment with, and think about what do you want to try to accomplish, and what is that experiment showcasing to you in terms of the behavior of your end clients. And so there's a couple of general principles of innovation that I love, and culture is a huge component of whether or not people can innovate. And a lot of the time, culture comes from the top down. And that's a lot to do with trust and respect. So people respecting one another and each other's ideas, and within teams and departments, within the organization and with your partners. And that trust and respect is built, but a lot of it comes from senior leaders. And we'll chat about that in a little bit, but it's also a lot about allowing for experimentation and allowing for people to make mistakes. And so encouraging people to bring forward ideas. So let's go back and think about how do we encourage diverse thinking? And it's by getting people to get to know and understand and respect each other's perspectives, and building a culture where it's safe to share ideas. And so how do we get people to get to know each other, understand and respect each other's perspectives? And that is through encouraging collaboration to enhance the culture of innovation. And so in order to do that, we want to first build a safe environment. And so an environment where we can take the time to understand one another and empathize, and that's going to lead to innovation. And when I say build safe environments, I don't mean that we're all going on retreats and sitting by a lake and trying to figure out new ideas. A safe environments where people feel it's okay to bring up crazy ideas that they have in their mind, but might feel a little bit shy to bring forward. And so how do you build that culture where people feel safe in order to be able to bring forward any ideas that they have? Not just bring forward, but also help build on each other's ideas too. And so the way that we tend to do it with the organizations that we work with in terms of encouraging collaboration and encouraging discovery is through a methodology called design thinking, which really focuses on empathizing with the end users in order to figure out who are the people that are impacted by the challenge. And once we discover who are the people that are impacted, defining what the real problem is, coming up with ideas, prototyping, and then testing out our solutions. And so within encouraging the diverse thinking is taking a look at your organizations and taking a look at who are the different people that your organization is comprised of, and understanding that each group or each behavior in the organization is needed, and who are they and how can you best understand them and communicate with them. And we'll touch on that in a second. And so I mentioned design thinking. It's an area that we personally focus in on at Spring2. If you Google it, you're going to find 5 phases, starting with empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. We actually pull back and we think about, okay, what's the initial problem we want to solve? So with businesses, a lot of the time, the initial problem is that we want to think about what's happening. Is our sales dropping? Are our customers going somewhere else? Is our revenue dropping? Is our profit dropping? And so that's our initial challenge. And then we want to pull back and think, well, if we solve this problem, what is our future going to look like? What are we going to use as a measure of success? And so we usually pull back and ask organizations to think about what are 2 or 3 things that you need to have to know that you will have been successful before you pull back and think about, well, who are the different people that are involved in the challenge that we have? And so if as a business, our challenge is to increase revenue, well, who are our current clients? How well do we know them? How do they behave? And then understand what their challenges are so that we can solve those challenges for and with them. Come up with the idea that we want to help them solve, and then come up with ideas, prototype, and then test. And with design thinking, prototyping is also a lot about understanding what people are thinking rather than proving whether or not something is right or wrong. And with design thinking, we usually recommend having 2 prototypes, and so that you can get an understanding of which parts of each prototype the end user groups like and why, so that you're finding out more about them and you can create better solutions with and for them. And so as we empathize with customers, we want to identify who the current customers are and who you want them to be. And I know a lot of folks on the call today are in a period of transition. And so you might have had customers 3 months ago that you no longer have. And so this is also an opportunity to think about who are the types of customers that you want to have. What do they look like? What are their values? What are their challenges? What are their goals, values, and fears? So that when you understand them better and understand what their challenge is better, and you can address that challenge, then you are creating a new market for yourself or increasing the stickiness that you already have with those clients.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Can you also think about customers? I think you're talking about customers from an external standpoint for customers. Can you also think about customers as being the HR practitioner in the business and your customers are your employee base? Does that make sense in this scenario as well?
Yeah, it does. And we're going to get to that. Yeah, definitely. And so your end client could be your employees too. And you want to do the same thing with your employees. We'll touch more on that in a second. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's about understanding the people that are involved in your organization. What are their challenges within each group? And each functional group acts differently. And even within each functional group, there's different types of behavior too. And so people in finance might act slightly different than people in IT, than people in R&D. And those in operations are slightly different. Those in sales and marketing are different. And even within sales and marketing, there's different groups too. And so it's really important to understand one another and to hear each other's perspectives so that you can work a lot more collaboratively and create that safe environment where you can work together too. And it's super funny, actually. HR is a really fascinating field that people outside of HR aren't that aware of what happens and what you guys are doing. And so we've actually gone into organizations where they had a challenge within an IT organization. And we had people from all the different areas that touched on this challenge. And then we also brought in HR. And we asked actually each representative to create a persona. And so a fictional character that represents their organization. And so we had each group do that, including the HR people that were there. And so HR created a persona of what are their challenges, what are their goals, what are their values, and what are their fears. And it was super fascinating to see how none of the other groups realized what HR did. And so after that session, people started to recognize what they did and how they could work with HR to make everybody's job easier and better. And so even understanding each other and what our goals are and what our challenges are creates a safer environment and a better support system so that you know who to pull in as you're working through some of the challenges that you have. And we'll chat a lot more about that too, because that's a huge component of building that culture, is understanding the people that are in there and getting them to understand one another so that they could work better together in a more collaborative environment. And so for those folks in B2B organizations where you're business to business, it's not only important to understand your customers, but your customers' customers. And so if you are, for example, creating, say, Windows, not only are you selling directly to consumers, but you might also be selling Windows to construction sites, to builders. And so the builders also have other customers. And so who are the builders' customers? And once you understand that and understand their challenges and their goals and their values, it's going to be easier for you to create products and services that meet those end consumers, end users' needs better. And therefore your business to business organizations, customers will be happier. So the reason, another reason we want to empathize is to make sure that we're solving the right problem. And this is where the innovation component comes in from. When you understand the people that you're trying to serve and understand their challenges better, then you are able to create new products, services, business models that are going to address them. So for example, I didn't have a poll for this, but when I say Amazon Prime, I'm going to assume probably 50% of you guys have Amazon Prime, especially right now. And the reason that Amazon came up with their Prime offering was that they went out and they talked to people and they asked them, what hesitation do you have with ordering products online? And what they heard a lot of the time was that they didn't want to pay for shipping. And the secondary one was they didn't know how reputable the organization that they were purchasing from. And so Amazon came up with this infrastructure to, first of all, be able to review products and also guarantee products. And on top of that, have an annual charge for all shipping and handling. Oh, and the other thing was that people wanted their products quickly. I don't know if you guys remember back in the Sears catalog days. As a kid, I remember flipping through and going, oh, I would love to have that. And then realizing that it's going to be 6 to 8 weeks before it gets delivered. And so with things like Amazon Prime, you get it right away. Other things like the reason that Uber does so well and did so well initially too was because, not necessarily because it was less expensive, but it's because people didn't know where their taxis were, and Uber allowed them to figure out where your Uber was and how long it was from getting to your place. Like I remember before Uber came along and having to travel to Toronto a lot for business, and putting in like a half hour, 45-minute buffer just in case the taxi didn't arrive on time. And so it's really important to pull back and understand who are your clients and what are their challenges and how can you help them address those challenges. As we're looking at being innovative too, a lot of organizations are getting into more end-to-end experiences. I'm going to guess that there's a number of ladies in the audience that have at least a few lipstick tubes in their purse, if not in their desk or in their drawers at home. And so on average, I'm going to guess you guys pay anywhere from $6 or $7 to $30 for your lips, for each lipstick tube. And so that's great. But if you're like me, I keep buying lipstick shades that don't work on my complexion and then keep putting them into the drawer thinking, okay, I'll use them one day. And so there's an organization, it used to be Canadian, I don't think it's Canadian anymore, it's called Bite Beauty. And so their specialty was in lipsticks and lip stains. And they've created this lab called the Bite Lab. There's one in Toronto and there's a couple in the States too, where you go in and you sit down and you talk about the colors that you like to wear, you talk about the shades of lipsticks that you like, and then they'll lay out different colors for you that you can test on the spot, and then ask you what sheen you would like, what flavor, I don't want to say flavoring, it should be what scent you would like. And then based on the color that you pick, the sheen, the scent that you like, they will actually create that lipstick for you as you're waiting. And so it's a lot about understanding who your end clients are. And Bite Beauty realized that a lot of the female clients that they have coming through want an experience around beauty and also want to make sure that they get the perfect shade of lipstick to go with their complexion and to go with the season as well too. And so while you might pay between $6 to $30 for lipstick, I ended up paying, I think it was $58 for the first one, and I didn't stop there. I ended up buying two, and so I think it was around $90. And I know that's a lot, but it wasn't not only about the making sure that I get the right shade, but also about the experience itself. And so as we're thinking about the environment that we're in, think about what are the end-to-end experiences that clients want to have. So a lot of organizations have been thinking about experiences and also understanding end clients better. One of the organizations that I actually had the fortune of working early in my career at was Procter Gamble. And so they make a whole bunch of different things, anywhere from Tide to Bounty to Bounce to Pampers. These are just some of the brands that they have. They have a whole bunch more. But the reason that they're so good at staying top of their market is because they spend a lot of time and energy in terms of understanding their end clients. And they also spend a lot of time and energy in creating an innovative culture too. And so when we look at some of their brands, I don't think, yeah, Charmin's up there, yeah. And so it's really fascinating. They actually have a lot of cleaning products on the market. And so usually they go into people's homes and they actually pay to be able to watch them clean so that they can figure out how they use their products as well as their competitors' products. And so while I was there, they actually wanted to test out different types of toilet paper. And so for the people that work there, they sent different types of toilet paper home with you. And in exchange for the free toilet paper, which is super valuable nowadays, in exchange for that free toilet paper, you actually had to tell them how you use the toilet paper. And so before this even started, I didn't even think about how I use toilet paper. And so I actually had to ask them, well, what do you mean how you use toilet paper? And so they asked, well, do you scrunch it or do you fold it? How many pieces do you use? And then what do you use it for? And how does it feel? And so it was quite an interesting experience because it's stuff that I hadn't even thought about before. And they sent us all sorts of different types, from like the super lush ones to the single ply ones to the sandpaper ones. And so they got all of our feedback from us and then tried to figure out what the ideal toilet paper would be for their end clients. And so as we were doing this, I was thinking, oh my God, think about the amount of time and effort they're spending to get to know their ultimate end clients. And so if they're doing this just with toilet paper, how about the other stuff that we're working on? And so there's a question here: who, what, where, when, why, how of a product or a service? I'm not sure I understand that. Do you mind typing in some clarifying questions on there? Or Bobby Lynn, if you could help interpret that one, that would be awesome.
Not entirely sure. I would encourage the attendee to go ahead and be a bit more elaborate in their question, please.
And while you're doing that, I'm just going to tell a bit more about Procter & Gamble too. And so we were doing that for our end customers, our ultimate end customers, but organizations like Procter & Gamble, they don't directly sell to the end customer. They actually go through grocery stores, through Walmarts, through Shoppers Drug Marts, through pharmacies. And so their ultimate end customer is the consumer, but they have to sell. And so they're actually a B2B organization. So they are selling to other organizations. And I remember when I was there, I spent time in their marketing and sales, and we spent a lot of time getting to know our buyers. And so who are the people in the organizations that we are selling to, and what do they like, what don't they like, and then trying to figure out how we can help them more. And so a lot of people don't realize this, but we also provided value-added services at no cost to make sure that we were able to help them and create that stickiness that wasn't necessarily there before. And so one of the things that we would do is we would create how the shelving display should look like. And so when you go into a grocery store, you'll notice that things are grouped together in a certain way. And so one of the value-added services we provided was to showcase what their shelving could look like with different brands so that their customers could have easiest access to the things that were the most popular, and for different styles of stores. So for smaller stores, we had different layouts than for larger stores. And so the reason I'm sharing this story is that for business-to-business organizations, it's not only important to understand who your clients are, but who your end clients are, and disseminate that information throughout your whole organization. And when you understand your end clients better, then you can understand what their challenges are and build business models that can shift as your consumers' behavior changes too. Who knew a year ago that we would have shortage of toilet paper, right? And so it's making sure that as you are growing, as the environment is shifting, making sure that you're understanding how your end users are shifting. Any more clarification on that question? Who, what, where, when, why, how of a product or a service? Or is that just a statement?
Haven't seen any clarification come through yet. It is an anonymous question, so I can't reach out directly, but I would again encourage the attendee to go ahead and ask another question or clarify.
Okay, perfect. And so as we go through, I'm going to ask you guys a question because I don't know which industries you're coming from, but I'm just going to put out our third poll there is, has your industry changed drastically over the last 3 months? So just a simple yes or no. Take about 20 seconds and then we'll look at the responses. Are we all set? Okay, that's really interesting. And so 65% of you have said that your industry has changed drastically over the last 3 months, and 35 no. And so really awesome on the no folks. And so then for the 65% is what we're talking about is going to be even more important. How do you transition? How do you change your culture as you're transitioning through this mode? And we'll get into that in a second. This is really a great time for innovation, and you're probably seeing this in your personal lives quite a bit too. There's a shift in consumer behavior, just alone in grocery shopping. If I think about myself doing grocery shopping, before all this happened, I wanted good selection of produce because I buy a lot of fruits and vegetables. And then I was also looking for what's the best possible price that I could get, and wanted freshness. Those were probably the 3 things that were most important. I didn't mind driving around from one store to another. We have Farm Boy here in Ottawa, which I love. I'd go to Costco, I'd go to Loblaws all in the same week, which was probably a little on the crazy side. But now my shopping behavior has changed. I don't even go to a grocery store. And the things that are most important to me now when I'm doing shopping is safety, seeing if the food can be delivered and whether they have stuff in stock. I almost don't even care about selection. Like, you have toilet paper, I'll take it. And in a lot of ways, it's also the pricing too. I don't care as much about the pricing. Safety and the ability to have it delivered is more important. And so this applies to the products and the services that you guys are creating. And also in terms of the people that are working in your organization, what they value has shifted. And so it's really important to understand how their priorities have shifted and what they're looking for in terms of a work environment, what they find stimulating, and how can you maintain that culture of innovation as for them and for the whole organization as you're going through this time of transition. So really great question earlier too on empathizing internally. And so as we do some internal empathization, I want you guys to think about who are the current employees that you have within your organization. Do you know what your culture is like within the organization? Do you know what the culture is like within each group within your organization? And then think about, what do you want your culture to be? And so we need to think about how we can encourage the behavior that you want for the culture that you want. A lot of the times we don't even think about who are the people that are in our organization at a deeper level. And so it's really important to pull back and go, who are the different groups based on behavior within my organization? And are they creating the culture that I want? What is the culture that I really want? And how can I encourage the behaviors that I want with the folks that I have? And so as you start to understand who your end clients are and who the people within your organization are, it's a lot easier to understand what their challenges are, what their values, goals, and fears are. And based on that, use that to help create that culture that you want to create. And so if you want to create a culture of innovation, making sure that you're encouraging and rewarding the people that are being more innovative, encouraging that ability to, that recognition that failure is a part of learning and a part of innovating, and having everybody in the organization understand one another so that they could better collaborate together too. So having had a really nonlinear career, I've worked in various departments, and how people behave even within the same organization in different departments varies. And as you understand that better, and as they understand one another better, it's easier to work together. And so, for example, in my career, I worked at Bell Canada for about 8 years in IT infrastructure, in R&D, and in marketing. And this was earlier in my career, and I was somewhat naive. And so in IT, I created a product that was very innovative, partnered with a number of private sector organizations to create this amazing way of imaging our computers and providing software to our employees. And I think it took 6 or 7 months to build. And then we put it out there, and I realized that no one's using it. And so I stayed on that project probably for another 1.5 years and created policies, rules around it. And then I moved over to R&D for a couple of years, and then finally moved over to marketing. And I actually had to use my own tools that I created. And because I was looking at it from a different lens, from a marketing lens, I saw all of these issues that I had never seen before. And so because I knew the team that had taken over the project for me, I was able to reach out to them and to talk to them and explain why we need to shift things up. And they were more than open to that. And so that was a really good experience. But if I hadn't had that connection, I wouldn't have been able to do that. And I could have saved the organization and myself a couple of years of heartache if I had brought in folks from marketing, brought in folks from sales, brought in folks from the help desk to take a look at what we're creating, to see how they react to it and what the impacts could be to them. And so it's really important to understand internally the people that are in your organization, not only to help them be innovative and to create the type of culture that you want, but also to be able to have folks working together. Because at the end of the day, people within organizations want to do the best job that they can. So there's a really good, oh, I guess they've put it into the Q&A now. Just gonna pull it up. So before innovation can happen, what suggested approach should be used to communicate your customers' expectations, needs to your organization's employees? How familiar should employees be with the product service that their employers develop and deliver? Oh my gosh, this is such a good question. I love it. And so our stance is that everybody in the organization should understand the end users that you're delivering to. And the reason for that is because you know your products and services or your processes extremely well. And if you understand your end clients too, then you can gear your product or services better towards that, towards those end clients. Like I remember doing some application development in an organization, and I built probably the most robust platform that you can think of. But then we brought end clients in and we asked them, what are the features and functionalities that you would like to see? And I think they pointed out like 2 or 3% of what we had developed. And so that's just for R&D, for the people that are developing your product. What about the people that are on your help desk? If they're able to understand your employees or your end clients better, then they're able to answer their questions a lot better. And so then how do you disseminate that information? And so we use, as part of design thinking, we use personas quite a bit. And so it's what we talked about before is having a fictitious character created to represent that group of employees or that group of end clients. And so as you're going through and you're trying to understand your clients better, have a person representing that group of clients. And so an example that we use often is, let's say if you go to Tim Hortons and you take a look at what are the different types of clients in there, you'll notice that there's people in there that are probably high school students. There's seniors in there, senior citizens in there. There's people in there that are probably families or sports teams that are grabbing some food or beverage before or after a game. Sometimes police officers. There's a whole variety of people that are in there. If you're in a Tim Hortons on the highway, it's almost always travelers as well. And so those are each different persona groups or different types of end clients that you have. And so for each type of end client, you want to create a character that represents that group. And so, for example, if we were looking at Tim Hortons and we were looking at senior citizens, maybe we want to have a character named William that represents senior citizens, and looking at and understanding what are their challenges, what are their values, what are their fears as they're within your environment, and having everybody in the organization understand that. And so for larger organizations, this might involve a person or a team that has different personas that are available to the groups. I know we've talked a number of times with TELUS. TELUS actually does have a group that maintains different personas, and as new projects come through, they're able to pull some of the personas that they've had in older projects and then take a little bit of time to revise them and then fit them towards what they need. Personas are really interesting because they shift depending on what the challenge is as well. So you want to make sure that you're updating it, and then people's behavior shifts over time as well too. And so for our business, we actually do identification of who are our end clients and get into as much detail as possible so that everybody in our organization understands them and understands how to communicate with them and make sure that we're solving the challenges that they have with them and for them too. And so how do you disseminate that is bringing in people to help disseminate that, or making sure that everybody understands who their end clients are with things as simple as a poster showcasing who are you serving. And it goes back to, at the end of the day, why do we do what we do? And it's to, doesn't matter what industry you're in, it's to make people's lives better. And so bringing that connection with their end user, people love to have that. And that actually creates more engagement from the employees within your organizations than anything else, is knowing that they're part of something bigger and that they're impacting real people. I hope that answers that question. I'm super passionate about all employees knowing who their end clients are. Okay, that's great. And so as you guys are thinking about your role in HR, is you might know everybody else's role in terms of what's in their job description, but what are their real challenges? What are their goals? What are their values? What are their fears? And then do they understand what you guys are doing too? Is because I find that HR folks have a wealth of knowledge and information that they have that's not tapped as much as it could be. A lot of the time within organizations that I've worked in, HR's only reached out to if you're looking to hire somebody or bring somebody onto your team, or if there's an issue with somebody within your team. And HR does so much more than that. And so it's how do you actually also help people within your organization understand what you do so that you could help them be more innovative as well. One organization we had the opportunity to talk with last year is called Build It by Design. And so they're actually a construction firm that specializes in restaurants. And so they build restaurants throughout North America and Canada and the States. And they use a lot of design thinking too, not just to understand the type of clients that they want, but also for hiring employees internally. And so in terms of the type of clients that they want, they have certain values and they look for businesses that have the same values. And so for their employees, same thing. They found that as they worked with employees within their organization, even though the people fit the job descriptions that they had, their values didn't fit. And so they still maintain the job descriptions, but they actually go after trying to understand who are the people that work well within their organization, and then look for those things in the people that they're hiring. So in terms of values, goals, making sure that they're aligned with the organization and with the people that they're going to be working with, more so than what their capabilities are. Because you can teach skills to people, but it's harder to teach mindset. And so as you guys are looking at your organizations, understanding your clients, but equally understanding who are the people within your organization. The other aspect of empathizing that I really love is creating empathy maps. And so empathy maps is looking at each group of people within your organization and trying to empathize with them and understand them at a deeper level. And it's so funny because a lot of organizations that we work with don't like the term empathy map. And so we sometimes call it an unarticulated needs map. And so taking a look at what is that group saying and what are they doing? Because oftentimes what they're saying and doing are two different things. And then what are they thinking and what are they feeling? And the thinking and the feeling are the areas that are going to help you get at what are the unarticulated needs that they haven't talked about. And so within your organization, think about the last time that you asked people in your organization what they think and what they feel, especially the feeling. That's going to get you a lot of really valuable information that you wouldn't have had access to before. And so, like I said, some people are really uncomfortable with it. A lot of the times the organizations that we work with that try to push back on the empathy mapping are the organizations that end up needing it the most. And so there's another comment question in here is, I don't think I realize how important it is for people in an organization to know and understand who the end client is, and also what other people in the organization do and how it all goes together. What's the best way to do this? And should it be part of the orientation process or done later after the employee's been there for a while? Oh, yeah, that's really good. Usually when we get pulled into organizations, we don't deal as much with the orientation component of it, but I think that would be a really good point to bring it up in orientation too, to understand who are the customers that we're serving, and especially within your group too, who is your group, and then as you're working within your group, who are the people that you're going to be interacting with in other parts of the organization. And so, yeah, I think at orientation, having people that are coming new onto your organization understand who your customers are would be super valuable to have, so that they're already in that mindset from day one. And then it would be great for you to help them understand who the other people within the organizations are. Oftentimes in the first day, or the first week, it's a little bit harder. And so I might say, understand the end customers first, and then a month or two in, understanding the organization more from a goals, challenges, values, and fears perspective. And another question that we have is, what are some common values that make a good fit in an organization? And so I think that depends on what your organization is. And so because we're talking about building a culture of innovation, I think some of the things that we talked about earlier, if you want to continue to build that culture of innovation, is people that value curiosity, that value discovery, that value understanding, and that value collaboration as well. I think those would be really good skill sets to have for people that would be a good fit into innovative organizations. And like I said, each organization has different people within the organization, and what they value in one department versus another department could be quite different. And so just take, for example, finance and R&D will likely have different values than sales and marketing. And so finance is more specific to accuracy and numbers, whereas R&D, if it's an innovative organization, they value the creativity component of it. Sales and marketing are more about making those sales. And so what are the values? Pull back, and we'll chat about this in a second too, is what are the values for your organization? And what do you want them to be? And then what are the values for each of the different groups within your organization too? So in a customer support person, you want someone that's probably wants to be solutions oriented, likes to talk. Whereas if you have someone, for example, I guess you want those skills and values from everybody in your organization. But if you have someone that's more just in the numbers component of it, that's not as highly valued than if they're in customer support. And so think about what the values are for your organization, and then what do you want the values to be for within your organization. And the best way to understand that is to take a look at the people that are really thriving and that are either role models or the people that others look up to, and take a look at what are their values. And so those are the values that you want to be replicating throughout your organization. Then those are the ones that are going to be a good fit within your organization. And we'll chat about values in a little bit, because that's super important as we're thinking about creating our culture, and also as we're thinking about how are we going to shift through what we're going through right now too. So I hope that answers it. If it doesn't, then just circle back again, and we can look at it after a few more slides. So yeah, keep the questions coming too, because they're really helpful in terms of helping me understand what we should be moving towards too and talking about. So if you guys could take a minute to think about in your work environment right now, as in today, are you working on site in terms of like at your company's location? Are you working from home without kids under the age of 17 years? Or are you working from home with kids under 17 years old? Or maybe you're not even working at all? Can we put that poll up, Bobby Lynn, and get people to vote in on that? Because that's going to help us as we're having our conversations going forward too.
Just hitting the 50% response rate, so we'll give it a couple more seconds.
Yeah, and like I mentioned, I have kids at home. One just turned 11 this week, and 13 years old. And everyone is under different working environments. And so it's really important to understand who are the people in your organization and what's the environment that they're working in. Okay, so 9% working on site, that's amazing. 50% are working from home without children under the age of 17, which is awesome. And then 21% with children under the age of 17, and then 21% not working. Yeah, Okay, that's really great information to have. And so most of you guys are able to, well, 50% are working from home without children under the age of 17. That's phenomenal. And so uh, one of the projects that we've done recently over the last couple of weeks is work with an organization that wanted to make sure that they're creating the best possible experience for their employees that are working from home. And so what we did was we actually went and talked with each of these groups. And so we took a look at office workers. We looked at power users. So these are people that are more on the technology end that end up needing to use more powerful computers and or use the network a lot more to do things like database queries. We talked to leaders, and then we also talked to trainers and facilitators within the organization, just to get their perspective on what are their challenges right now as we're in this transition period. What are their values? What are their goals? What are their fears? What are their expectations? And what they would like to see from their organization. And as we talked to each group, it was so fascinating to see how they had different challenges, different perspectives, different needs, and also expectations as well. And so, for example, the office workers, a lot of them were able to keep working. What differentiated the office workers from other folks was the fact that they actually, I think, had more people with children under the age of 17 years old. And so not only did they have their regular challenges of making sure that they had the equipment that they needed at home, but they also had the added challenge of adjusting what they did, how they did it, and when they did it around their kids' schedules. Power users, leaders, trainers, and facilitators were quite different too. And so trainers and facilitators loved being able to interact with the people that they're facilitating and teaching, and within a virtual platform, that's a lot harder to do. And so we talked a lot about the technologies that they could use for collaboration and agree upon and get really good at going forward. Leaders wanted to make sure that the people that were in their organization were being well taken care of. And we talked about the challenges of how do you manage people virtually and in such different environments. And so they recognized that a lot of people were at home with kids. And so how do you manage those folks versus the people that were at home that didn't have the kids, that in a lot of ways their life was simpler, less of a commute, spending less money, and also able to take advantage of some of the additional things that they didn't have advantage of before, like being able to access double monitors in their work environment. And so depending on the type of end user this organization we were talking to, they had different needs, different challenges, and understanding each of them helped the organization understand how they could create better products or services for their own employees. And the best way to understand what your employees need and want is to actually talk to them, and talk to them in groups while creating a really open environment for them to have these conversations. And so, for example, we started out talking with the office workers, and in order to create that safe environment, we started sharing what our home office environment looked like. And so for these sessions, my kids had school during the day, and so some of them have Google Hangouts or Google Classrooms. And so I didn't have access to my office or even my dining room table. So I actually had to work upstairs in my bedroom on a yoga roller. So I was sitting on a yoga roller, crouched beside the window, between the window and my bed, trying to work. And from there, we had other people on the team share their work environment. And then we asked the folks that were on virtually to also share some of their challenges that they were going through and the environment that they were in. And some amazing stories. There was one lady in there that was working in her closet because she had a young child. I think she was 2.5 years old. And if her child saw her, then she'd want to talk and interact with her. Whereas if she hid in her closet and she didn't hear her, then her daughter would leave her alone, and her mother-in-law could take care of her daughter. And as we were doing the session, her daughter saw her or heard her and then saw her. And so she's like, sorry, I got to put you guys on mute because I have to run out to the garage and start working from the garage. And so it's really fascinating the different environments that people are living in and living through right now. And so as you're thinking about how do you better take care of employees, think about who are the different groups and how their and how their challenges have shifted and how their behavior has shifted, and how can you better, what can you offer them? And the other aspect that we took a look at with this group was what are some of the silver linings? And there are a lot of silver linings in the transition time that we're in. And a number of people said the reduction of commute time is phenomenal. People are sleeping more. Some people are exercising more time with family. And so as you're looking at your employees during this time of transition, getting a better understanding of what their needs are, and also helping them see what some of the value is of this time that we're in. Any questions so far? Okay, I'll keep going. And so right now, everyone's world has changed. Some for the better, some not. I don't share this with too many folks, but earlier on, I actually, well, the hospital suspects I had COVID. And so I had probably about 2 intense weeks of not being able to do anything, and a few visits to the hospital. All is better now, but that was a pretty dramatic shift for me, and a large shock, as I'm trying to take care of 2 kids at home who ended up getting it as well too. And so the transition time was even longer for that. And then also having friends, parents pass away along the way. It's an unprecedented time for our lifetime, and so many things have changed. And so the question is, how do I not only adjust, but how can you take advantage of this environment, and how can you help your employees see some of the advantages of this environment? And part of that we chatted about is the ability to do more experimentation, ability to make sure that they're taking the time to do some of the learning, especially if they can't be in the office or on the network. And part of that is understanding who your employees are, and also understanding who your clients are. And so that you can understand them better and understand what they need now as we're in the crisis and emerging from the crisis. So a lot of businesses have done a really great job of this. As we talk about those businesses though, I wanna first get you guys to think about what are some things that you wanna talk about or think about to understand not just your customers better, but also your employees better. Who are your customers? And if you're looking at it from an employee perspective, who are your employees? And then who do you want your customers to be? Or who do you want your employees to be? If you don't have the type of culture or the environment that you want, think about what you want that to look like. What do you want your employees to look like? What values do you want them to have? And then think about how has your customer's life changed? And if you're looking at it more internally, how have your employees' lives changed? And do you understand what their challenges are? The client that we had talked about earlier, they actually brought us on to make sure initially that everybody had the technology that they needed. And it became really rapidly apparent that it wasn't about the technology, it was about the shifts in the environment that they're in, and the different things that they need to do and the different ways that they need to do it. And so think about who are your clients, how has your customer's life changed? And then the final thing is, what are the things that are driving your customers now? Or for internally, what are the things that are driving your employees now? What do they now want and what do they now need? And I know a lot of us are in industries where sales have gone down, or we're not getting the customers anymore too. And so what are some of the things that the folks in your organization now need? And what was really fascinating with the group that we were working with is a group of folks in there really wanted a bit more direction and transparency from leaders around what was going to happen post-COVID, how people were going to transition back into the work environment. And so we wouldn't have known that had we not gone and actually talked to them in a group environment, created that safety environment, had those conversations with them to understand that this was even a concern for them, let alone something that was actually keeping them up at night. And so as you're talking to your employees, understanding who they are, what are the different groups, what are their challenges, and then what do they need and want right now, so that you're able to offer that as you guys are going through this transition period. A couple more polls for you. So what are your top internal challenges with employees since COVID? Keeping employees working, keeping employees safe, maintaining employees motivated, increasing employee innovation, or is there something else? Think about what are your top internal challenges with employees since COVID. I'll give you guys about 15, 20 seconds to select it. And again, like reminder, you guys can ask questions anywhere along the way. I love getting the questions. That's really good feedback for me to see what we should be talking more about as well too. Okay, awesome. We got the poll results. So keeping employees working, 19% is the biggest challenge. And so keeping employees safe is 22%, maintaining employee motivation, 46%. Yeah. Increasing employee innovation, 4%, and then other 9%. Yeah. And it's super fascinating to see these results. And so I would say 2 weeks ago, I would have said most people, it should be keeping employees working or safe. But as we talk to our clients, and then as I talk to more people within my own organization, I realize how people's mental health had shifted, and that they were having a harder time with motivation. And so we've started talking more and more about how can we keep people motivated during this time. And we'll chat about this in a second too, but it's a lot about going back to helping them understand why they do what they do. And so a lot of us are doing jobs that we're super passionate about, or there's an aspect that we really like, and there's a reason why we started doing what we're doing, and trying to bring them back to that is what has motivated them to start doing what they're doing, and then looking at who are the people that they are serving and the impact that they're having on those folks. Oh, and then there's something here for this poll. I think you should allow more than one answer. Yeah, that's true, as most are big challenges right now. Yeah, that's so true. Actually, I was thinking that too as I was creating that. I'm like, there should be an all button, because you're right. A lot of this is really top of mind right now, is making sure that we're trying to keep people safe, keep making sure that people are continuing to work, continue to be motivated, and then how do we increase innovation when all of this is happening all around us. And that innovation component of it is through the mindset that this is an amazing opportunity to do that experimentation and to start doing some reframing as well. And so how can we think of what we're doing differently? We can come back to some of these later too. It helps me understand where your mindsets are at too, as we're going forward into the last leg of the presentation too. And so one additional poll here is, what are your top external challenges since COVID? And so is it that you can't get customers anymore? Customers aren't buying as much, customers aren't buying at all, or something else? What are your top external challenges as it applies to your customers?
My apologies. I think I missed setting up this poll. So if
Oh,
we could ask our sorry about that. If we could ask our attendees to put their comments in the Q&A box, that would be awesome.
yeah, that's even better because that's more open-ended. And it doesn't have to be one of those. You can choose whatever you'd like. Okay, customers not buying. Yeah, that's been a big shift. Customers aren't buying as much. Customers aren't buying as much. Yeah, customers aren't buying as much. Yeah, yeah. I think a lot of us are really feeling the impact of that. That customers aren't buying as much. Yeah, customers aren't buying as much, and so yeah, I'm getting that a lot. And so a lot of the time, we're recognizing within our customers too that people are still in a state of shock. And yeah, there's a great comment in here too, is there's general uncertainty with how to proceed, how to process what's going on, and then how to proceed too. And so as we're thinking in terms of our clients, and as we're talking to our clients, we're taking a look at, well, we don't know what's happening right now or how long this is going to last, or whether or not our clients will increase spending and continue purchasing during and after this. And so we're pulling back and getting them to think about how they can adapt. And so some of the different ways that they can adapt, I'm just going to skip over this one. So because we talked a lot about embracing the new reality, and I think you guys get that. Part of the ways that we can adapt to this new environment is thinking about how we can reframe what's going on, and also keeping in mind that resilience is developed as we're overcoming adversity. And so we want to make sure that resilience is top of mind for us as we're going through this. And resiliency is built as organizations pivot into new areas, adopt new ways of doing things, and keep moving forward. And so this is a huge time of transition. And we didn't even talk about digital transformation. I've never seen so many people working online and with getting familiar with digital technologies as fast as it has happened right now. Like even my parents are on WhatsApp calls and Zoom calls too. And so understanding that this is an opportunity to shift people's behavior and shift into new areas is really important. And as we take a look at who are our customers and who are our employees, that's how we can understand when and where to pivot to as well. And we'll talk about that in a second. And we build resiliency through understanding what our end clients are going through, their challenges, values, goals, and fears. And so I didn't set it up as a poll too, but I'd love to know how many of you guys have talked to your end clients to understand what their mindset is now. What are they thinking? What are their new challenges? What are their values? What are their goals? What are their fears? So that you can understand them and address them, whether it's through communications or products or service offerings that you guys are creating going forward. And all of these things apply for resiliency, whether you're in private sector or public sector too. So it all goes back to going and talking to your end clients and understanding how they've shifted, getting inside their mindsets so that you can address some of their concerns. And so we talked about the grocery shopping earlier. For me, safety is the major concern. And so I love how apparently in grocery stores, they put up the plexiglass, but are there other things that they're putting in there that are going to make me feel comfortable with going in there? Or is there an opportunity to create another service? And so, for example, home deliveries has taken off with the metro near my house and through the Loblaws. Is this an opportunity for new lines of business to start occurring, businesses that deliver anything you want? So there's lots of different opportunities out there. It's just pulling back and seeing how your end clients have shifted. So this brings us to the reframing component is a large part of innovation and the culture of innovation is the ability of your organization and the people in your organization to reframe what's going on, and also their own particular biases and framing. And so before all this happened, I talked a lot about reframing, but I didn't realize how much reframing we did in our lives on a daily basis. And so if I were to ask you guys in the audience, how many people have been to IKEA in the last 4 or 5 years, I bet you a lot of you would put up your hands. And what do we do for IKEA? We go into distribution centers to pick up pieces of furniture that we can bring home and assemble ourselves. And when I say IKEA, what do you guys think of? It's usually modern furniture, meatballs, hot dogs, and kids' play area. And so a lot of things come to mind, and that we have shifted our mindset in terms of what a furniture store looks like. If you go outside of IKEA, chances are you're going to be going in and looking at furniture that's on display and choosing the product that you like and the fabric that you want, and then they'll deliver it to you within 6 to 8 weeks. And so IKEA has helped us reframe what we want and what we need. And so has other organizations like the Amazons of the world. So we want to think about what are some other opportunities to reframe. Before we go on, we have another couple questions. What are some ways companies are preparing to transition back to the workplace? That's a really good question. And so maybe we can save this a little bit for at the end too, because I'd love to hear what other people in the group are doing too. We haven't heard too much in terms of what companies are doing to prepare to transition back to the workplace, honestly, other than with clients and colleagues of ours that are in the construction industry. They're putting in some precautions, but not as much as I would have liked to see. I know in some of the retail organizations and with daycares within Quebec, they've put in a lot of things and processes and procedures that they need to follow. But in terms of working in an office environment, I haven't seen too much. And I think not knowing is really daunting for a lot of people. We get a chance to talk with folks like David Coletta every now and then too, and his organization does Abacus Research does a lot of research in this area right now, and I saw some interesting stats today that 7% of people were comfortable with the environment that we're in right now and would be comfortable going to eat at a restaurant, which kind of surprised me. And then they had some statistics around what are some other things that people need to see before going out to a restaurant once again. There was the distancing of tables, there's the cleanliness procedures, and then the fact that everybody would wear a mask. And so depending on the organization, I think you need different things in place to transition back into the workplace. But I'd love to hear at the end if you guys have certain things that you have prepared already. And
I'm going to pop in for just 1 second. I think referring back to one of the slides you had a little bit earlier, and you were talking about the differences in the grocery store when you were shopping, and some of the things that were top of mind before were freshness and that kind of thing, whereas now some of the things that are top of mind for you were safety and delivery, that sort of thing. I think maybe the same thing in preparing to transition back to work. Some things that were important before are less important now or are different. So I think safety is, in terms of preparing to transition back to the workplace, safety, open communication, mental health supports and flexibility would be some that will look different in each workplace, but I would think some of those would be, so safety, communication, mental health, and flexibility might be some parameters in terms of transitioning back. Is it, what do you think?
Yeah, that's excellent points, Bobby. And yeah, totally, definitely. Yeah. And so it all goes back to who are the people in your company, and what do they want, and what is their perspective right now too. And so, yeah, the safety component is probably the biggest factor. And then, yeah. And so Yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts at the end. There's another question in here too. Given the current circumstances, as we are seeing organizations adapting how they're completing their work, what their products will look like in the face of changing market, and what the workplace itself looks like. In a lot of ways, it feels that the environment is changing faster than the decisions to adapt. Absolutely. Do you have any advice for how we can help employees feel some autonomy and control over how we're adapting to changing needs of our customers and our workplace? And so the question is, do we have any advice for how we can help employees feel some autonomy or control over how we're adapting to changing needs of our customers and our workplaces? Yes, so thank you. I'm going to switch over to the next couple of slides. And so let me know if I didn't answer this properly, but in terms of reframing right now, there's some things that you need to consider as an individual and as an organization. So reframing your mindset and the value that you want to provide going forward, reframing what you're offering and how you're offering it, as well as reframing what you know about your clients and reframing what you know, what you have, and be ready to expand your framing. And so I'm just going to go back to a question. Do you have any advice on how we can help employees feel some autonomy or control over how we're adapting to the changing needs of our customers and our workplaces? And so the autonomy and control is allowing your employees to see what your customers are saying. And then in terms of transitioning back into the work environment too, I would create multiple prototypes and put them in front of your employees and ask them which ones they would prefer or what parts of each one they would prefer and why. Because at the end of the day, you want to make sure that your employees are feeling in control. And so the best way to do it is to put it into their hands. Same thing with customers too, is as you guys are looking to shift or are wanting to know more about them, giving them prototypes that you can put in front of them so that they can tell you their perspectives of what they like, what they don't like. There's also coming in here about transitioning back and safety, reconfiguring workspaces. Most of the spaces were open, collaborative spaces, and now we have to rethink that as we won't be having 100% of the people back on site. Yep, that's true. And so what we've discovered as we're talking to our customers too is because people have had to adopt the technology and had to learn how to use the technology in order to be able to work from home, they're getting more comfortable with working from home too. And so I think there's going to be a larger desire to work from home if possible. And then considering how you're going to accommodate that. And for those that can't work from home and have to go in, there has to be some way of helping them feel safe. And so it's funny, I was reading an article the other day about how airplanes are going to be shifting their seating configuration to make sure that there's more spacing in between, and also putting in plexiglass. And so, yeah, we want to be able to think about what are the different ways that you can reconfigure the workspaces, and once again, put it in your employees' hands. Give them examples of what it could look like, or ask them to create examples or prototypes of what it could look like, and then share it with a larger population and test it out. Test out how people feel about each prototype and each aspect of the prototype, so that you can get their feedback and get a feel for what they're thinking. Because at the end of the day, they have to be comfortable working in that environment, and if they feel like they've had control over it, then it'll be easier for them to adopt. Great questions, thank you. Really good stuff. As we're talking about reframing too, is making sure that you pull back and you think about, what do you really do? So there's a number of organizations that have been really great at reframing rapidly. There's actually a company close to Ottawa that used to sell gin, and so it's called Top Shelf Gin. And within a few days of the outbreak really coming at the forefront of everybody's minds, they pulled back and they thought, okay, yes, we produce alcohol, but right now we also have an opportunity to become a chemical company and switch from drinking alcohol to hand sanitizer. And so within a few days, they were able to shift up what they produced from gin to hand sanitizer. And so think about, what do you do? Are you for example, a restaurant, or could you be a convenience store? What are your end clients wanting and needing? Where is their mindset at, to figure out how you can shift and reframe what you do? Because we're more than what we think we are. And the best way to understand that is by talking to our end clients and getting them to help us frame what we do for them. There's another company online called Lucky Clothing. And so, yes, you could purchase clothing online, but they've also shifted some of what they're doing. So one of their shops that used to manufacture clothing is now distributing masks, producing and distributing masks for those in need. And they also have on their website instructions on how to make masks. And so they're not just a clothing retailer. Now they're also helping the community out and helping those in need too. So pull back and think about, reframe what you do. There's a lot of reframing going on. There's organizations that are also helping us how we do things as simple as dating. How do you get ready for a virtual date now? You can reframe anything and everything, understanding that so much has shifted so rapidly. And so we talked about alcoholic beverage companies shifting to chemical companies, restaurants moving to corner stores, providing supplies for pickup. Some restaurants are going to donating for food to frontline workers, and so they're providing value for community. And some of them have actually also established opportunities for people, that are able to be able to donate money to them so that they can provide food to frontline workers. Other potential examples of gas stations going from self-serve to full service and allowing you to pick up groceries while you're at the gas station as well too. And so there's lots of different ways that you could reframe what you are and what you do based on how your end clients' needs have shifted. Other factors for successful innovation, we chatted a little bit about speed. There's a simplicity component to it, so simplify as much as you can. Execution, and then communication. The really important thing to remember though, in terms of factors for successful innovation, is culture plays the fundamental role in here on if and how fast an organization can transform and respond to external shifts. Because of COVID right now, nobody has a choice. We all have to shift. And so the culture that you've had in the past, this is also an opportunity to shift the culture that you've had based on how you're transitioning and how you're understanding your end clients and meeting their needs as well. And so keep in mind that ideas become innovation upon execution as well too. So it's great to go out, talk to your end clients, come up with ideas, but you need to make sure that you're executing on it. Right now, we have to be a lot more rapid in terms of execution, but in the past couple of decades, organizations have had the opportunity to take their time. If they've discovered something, they've had the opportunity to take their time to take it to market. So for example, at 3M in 1968, Dr. Spencer Silver discovered an invention of non-sticky adhesive. He actually accidentally discovered it because he was trying to create a super strong adhesive. And so for 5 years, he was promoting this invention throughout 3M and trying to see if anybody could come up with an application for the invention. And it wasn't until 1974 that one of his colleagues was in church and was always having his bookmark fall out. And so Art Fry remembered the invention that Dr. Silver had and decided to put the low adhesive glue onto a piece of paper onto his bookmark so that it would stay in place. And now the rest is history. I mean, you see Post-it notes everywhere. And so in the past, we've had the luxury of coming up with inventions and then waiting to figure out the application. We don't have that luxury right now, but it also means that we don't have to get it right the first time. People are a lot more lenient in terms of what they're willing to accept because they understand that everyone's going through this transition. And so really important to think about how can you experiment during this time. And so as we're closing off, I want to make sure that you guys think about who are your customers and who do you want them to be, because this is an opportunity to shift who your customers are. And so who are your customers? What are their new challenges, values, fears, and goals? And who do you want them to be? We have a question in here. And what would you say to senior leaders that are resistant to innovation change in an organization, whom often cite money or time as being a major obstacle? How can HR and employees advocate for innovation successfully? I'm going to put this one on hold because we're going to get to that one in a second. HR and employees advocating for innovation successfully goes back to what are their leaders' goals? What is the organization's goals? And so let's keep that one live for a second and I'll get to that. As we took a look at who are your customers and who you want them to be, especially in this time of transition, if you guys are noticing that people aren't buying as much, you can't force people to buy more. So either you have to switch up what you do or go after a different type of customer. And in order to do that, you need to be innovative and you need to move forward with that. And you need to have motivation for the folks that are in your organization to innovate. And so remember, go back to getting people to think about what do they really do? And that could shift. Why do they do it? And then also take a look at what some of the past successes have been. And then think about what value do you bring to your end clients? Because there's a reason that people have purchased from you in the past. What value are you bringing to them? And what value do you think you're bringing to them? And what value do they think you're bringing to them? Can you still continue to bring that same value or more value to them in this time of transition? And this is a really important point, is what do your clients think your value proposition is? Oftentimes it's actually quite different than what we think it is. And so it's really important to pull back and talk to your end clients and ask them, what value do we bring to you? And when people in your organization understand that better, it's easier to understand whether or not you should pivot, where you should pivot to, and how you should be marketing and selling going forward. And then what do you want your value proposition to be? Because right now, as the value you're bringing, if your customers aren't buying as much, their values have shifted. And so what's the value proposition that you need to provide for them? Sorry, I'm just skipping over these to make sure that we're covering everything. And what do your clients value now? Making sure that you understand what they value now going forward. Normally, if we were all sitting together, just with those last 3 questions, I'd probably want you guys to spend 3 or 4 minutes thinking about that individually. And if you're able to, go back to your organizations and ask the senior leaders those same questions. If I had to go back, what do your clients think your value proposition is? What do you think your value proposition is? What do you want your value proposition to be? And what do your clients value now? That's the biggest part of innovating right now, is taking a look at what do your clients value now. And the biggest part of successful innovation is the ability of the people that are coming up with the innovations to sell innovation. And so making sure that you know your end clients and also know your leaders. And so as you're looking to sell innovation and change in your organization, it really helps to understand what are your leaders' goals, values, challenges, fears, and also what's their communication style. Do they like stuff written, oral, visual? Are they analytical? Are they conceptualizers? Are they affiliators? Do they need to see the numbers? Do they need to see concepts? Do they need to see a connection with people? The better you know your leaders, the easier it is for you to figure out how to sell with them. And so those that are citing money and time as being a major obstacle, especially in this time where the revenues are going down because people aren't buying as much, you need to be able to innovate and change. Otherwise, you're going to continue to go down. This isn't going to change in the near future. And as organizations innovate and shift, customers are going to transition to those companies that are going to meet their current needs, and they probably won't leave them afterwards. And so if you're not changing, innovating, and shifting, you're going to continue to lose more clients. So it's really important to pull back and think, what do you need to do as an organization? Is it time to pivot? Is it time to get more different clients? And then how do you sell them to your leader? And how can HR and employees advocate for innovation successfully? And a lot of that is about understanding what your organization values. And so what's fascinating is that the companies that we work with and the organizations that we work with, they either value money or time more. And yes, they equate to the same thing, but as we work with organizations, we've been able to see that depending on what they're saying and the reasons that they're providing for not changing or not innovating, tells us what's more important to them. And so then we shift the messaging in terms of what's being created, whether it's the new product, service, process, to what they value more, whether it's time or whether it's money. And so if time is more important, describing how much more time is going to be saved by going through this innovation or through this change, or if money is more important, how much more money you're going to get or how much money you're going to save. I hope that answers that question. And so as we're closing off, and I know it's near the end, is make sure that you cultivate and nurture and apply unorthodox thinking as an organization. And just as you have a customer obsession, think about having that employee obsession too, understanding your employees as well as you can and getting them to understand one another. And recognizing that all your clients are different. And as your clients are different, your employees need to be different as well because they represent your clients too and the way that they are thinking. In order to understand your employees in the new world, rather than guessing what employees want, to truly understand them, ask them. Ask them what they want and continuously ask them because things are shifting so rapidly. What was relevant 3 weeks ago might not be as relevant now for the employees in your organization. So continually have that conversation with them and make sure that they feel safe and comfortable to have those conversations with you. In terms of if you want to learn more about design thinking and innovation, we have virtual training products, so visit us on our Spring2 Innovation website. And if you want afterwards too, feel free to reach out to us on social media, or if you want, you can contact me, Nilufer at Spring2 Innovation, and I'd be happy to talk with you. Otherwise, I'm going to open it up again for the Q&A if folks have other questions, if that's okay, Bobby Lynn.
Absolutely.
So if you have questions, please feel free to type it in. Always happy to talk. And I know we're getting a little bit later, but I love the area of culture, innovation, understanding users, understanding customers. And so I could keep talking. Maybe as people are thinking about what they want to ask, maybe I could ask you guys, what did you find the most valuable in this session? What are the different areas that you felt the most value from or had the most impact out of? Feel free to write it in the Q&A section. Okay, great. I got a question, comment that said this was great. Yeah, and if there's a particular area you enjoyed more, reframing was super helpful. Okay, amazing. Yeah, that helps us know that too. Interactive. Okay, I'm glad you guys like the interactivity. And then touching on the last slide, what are some sample questions we could ask during the Pulse survey to get an idea of what employees want? I am not, so surveys are a good way of getting information from people that are within your organization. I'm a bigger fan of actually talking to the folks, but if you wanted to understand your employees better through the survey, I would ask them more open-ended questions like, as we're going through this transition or at this time, what are they thinking? What are they feeling? And then asking them what are their expectations of themselves and what are their expectations of the organization, just so that you're getting an understanding of what employees want and expect from the organization and from you too, as a leader. Innovation is the key right now, definitely. Glad you guys like the examples. Impressed with employee obsession. Yeah, I think that's really important for organizations, especially right now too, because employees are the folks that keep the organization going, moving forward, creating that culture, keeping you guys innovating. And the emphasis that we need to change and be ready to pivot was good. Awesome. And then it was great that you bring in your experiences, not from work, but also personal. Oh, thanks. Yeah, lots of fun stuff going on in the personal world too. And it was helpful to have a reminder of how important having a culture that sets the foundation for innovation and understanding your customers, and customers are great examples too. Okay, great, thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate that. And then building a culture of innovation and rewarding ideas, good or bad. Yeah, exactly. Rewarding all ideas, whether they're good or bad, definitely. And if you guys have any questions, keep putting them in. I'm going to go back to one of the questions that was asked as well earlier, is if you guys have any thoughts on what you're putting in place for your employees as we're going through the transition and as they're going to be coming back into the work environment. As you guys think about comments that you want to write around things that you're doing as employees transition back to work, I'm just going to read another question in here. Sometimes innovation generates a sense of fear among employees. What's your advice? Yeah, and so I think a lot of the time when we've been involved in organizations that innovation has a sense of fear is when innovation is done in groups rather than asked of from the whole organization. I think change happens all the time, and our level of comfort with change depends on whether it's something that we've chosen or if it's something that is imposed on us. And a lot of the time, I think with people in organizations, the people that are doing the job know best how to innovate what they're doing. And so if innovation is open to everybody within the organization, then people feel like they have more control over it and there's less fear around it. And then there's also the transparency component of it too, is what does innovation mean to your organization? How can you add to innovative ideas? How can you get involved in innovation projects too? If that's not clear, then there'll be some fear around that as well. Even if there are rewards for innovation, people feel like if they're not part of it, or if they're not aware of how it's happening or how it's being monitored, then that fear continues. Because at the end of the day, we fear the unknown. And if we know what's going on, then it's easier to be part of it. So some other comments we have here is we're planning to distance employees, like distance their desks. Sadly, some QBs will be empty. Yeah, and I like the plexiglass idea too. Yeah, and so, and then figuring out, yeah, that's a really good comment. Thanks for that one. And then I think it's important to keep in contact with employees who are not working or working from home. Yep, this helps understand what they want and need now and what they want and will need when they return. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And then in our organization, we're bringing back employees slowly over several weeks, setting up plexiglass barriers between workstations. Yeah, that's really great too. And I mentioned some of our clients are public sector organizations too, and within the federal government, they have something called an initiative called ABW, but people call it Workplace 3.0, where they have been transitioning to unassigned seating. And just speaking to colleagues that are working in the federal government, I think that's going to be put on hold for quite a while. And so it's making sure that you're looking at everything from the cleaning procedures to how people are spaced to how they're even entering and leaving the work environment will be really important. There's a comment in here on individuals will have schedules, for example, 2 days at home and 3 days from home, different start times, only one person in the elevator at a time. Yeah, those are really great. Yeah, I really like that. Yeah. Even something that was so simple as going in an elevator now becomes a potential for anxiety. And that's the last thing you want from the folks in your organization is that you want them to feel good coming in there, to feel like they're safe and want to continue to be productive in their work. Yeah, and so those were really good comments. Any other questions or comments before we're signing off? Okay. Well, I wanted to thank you guys for spending the evening with us. I loved all the questions and the comments, especially on the transition plans too, as you guys are going back to work. Always happy to talk about innovation, culture, and understanding end clients and understanding employees and having that employee obsession. And so thank you so much. I wish I could see you guys in person, but yeah, feel free to reach out.